So you want to know how to get that soft, dreamy look in your photos. That look that's almost like the scene was blessed by the light gods themselves. But here's the thing, that look isn't magic. It's a technique that's done purposefully. And today I'm going to give you 3 tips to help you achieve that dreamy style in your own photos. Hey friends, Riyadh here, and for years I chased that dreamy look. But no matter what I tried, it never felt naturally soft and magical enough. But after years of trying, failing, trying again, and failing again, I eventually got my photos to a place that I was satisfied with, mostly. You'll never be 100% satisfied with your own photos. But I've learned that there are 3 key things that, when used all together, elevate your photos into that beautiful, natural dreaminess. And the results are quite satisfying. Alright, so let's just dive into it. The first tip starts even before you take the first photo, and that's finding the right light. In my experience, the easiest outdoor light for that soft, dreamy feel is evening light. Yes, we are talking golden hour. That magical time when the sun is low on the horizon, shadows are soft, and everything takes on a bit of a warm glow. But timing the light is only half the story. Tip 1.5 is pay attention to where the sun is in relation to your subject. For this dreamy look, I get the best results when my subject is either backlit or sidelit. It creates depth and softness. If the sun is hitting your subject straight on, you'll get flat light, and that makes this dreamy effect much harder to pull off. Now, shooting sidelit tends to be a little bit easier, since backlit can cause ghosting and flares in your lens, but you do actually want a bit of ghosting in your photos to get the dreamy look. If you're unfamiliar with the term ghosting, it just means when you shoot towards a strong light source, in this case our solar system's strongest light source, the sun, light can bounce around inside of your lens. That scattering creates haze or ghosting across your frame. It causes contrast to drop, and depending on what lens you're using, can cause the contrast to be very low. Now, this is where you have to experiment with the backlighting. It's not just a case of sticking your subject between you and the sun and start pew-pewing your shots. Try shifting your subject around, directly in front of the sun or with the sun still behind but just off to one side. Play with having the sun in your frame versus slightly out of it. You can even let the light peek through trees behind your subject for a beautiful glowing effect. As well, when shooting backlit, there is a chance of lens flaring, but the good news is that when trying to achieve the dreamy look, a little flaring adds to the vibe. Just make sure that you use the flaring tastefully and not let it overpower your subject. Or I don't want to tell you what to do. Once it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, that's pretty much all that matters. Okay, so we've covered lighting. Let's move on to tip number 2, and that's about gear, or rather one little accessory that can completely transform your images into that soft, dreamy style. A mist filter. If you're new to mist filters, it's pretty much a physical thing, not an Instagram preset. It's a piece of glass you screw on to the front of your lens like this. Up close, it looks like slightly dirty glass or glass with tiny specks in it, and that's where the magic comes from. Those microparticles soften your photos and make highlights bloom, giving you that ethereal glow. Now, there are tons of these mist filters out there, from budget-friendly to high-end and even DIY options. If you're after an inexpensive one that doesn't shift your colors too much, I've linked the Neewer black diffusion filters below. Affiliate link disclosure, I do earn a very small commission from these links, but at no extra cost to you, so do what you may with that information. They come in half, quarter, and 1/8 strengths, and I recommend starting with 1/8 because a little really does go a long way with these mist filters. Just make sure you buy the correct filter size for your lens. If you really don't want to spend money on a mist filter, you can try making one yourself, and it's pretty easy to do. If you have a UV filter laying around like this, you can give it a little spritz of hairspray, which mimics the particles on an actual mist filter. No, this is not a prank, it actually works. The advantage of this option is that you can really get precise with the amount of mist you want, because it's essentially custom made. Now, if you messed up and you put too much hairspray on it, you can just clean it off and start again. Now, the negative about this DIY option is that even after the hairspray dries on the UV filter, there is a very real possibility of smudging it, and then you have to do it all over again. Okay, so moving on to tip 3 in achieving the dreamy look. I think I've said the word dreamy like a million times in this video already. Anyways, tip 3 has to do with editing your photos. I'm gonna break this up into 3 parts. Part 1, the clarity and texture sliders in Lightroom. To achieve the look, you'll want to reduce the clarity quite a bit. Generally, I find it's to around -25 to -35. This tends to soften up the image and naturally blooms the highlights. While you're dialing back on the clarity, you also want to try messing with the texture slider. You're gonna be a little more subtle with this one though. It doesn't need drastic changes. I find that if I'm shooting with a super sharp lens, dialing it back to around -5 to -10 helps to dampen the sharpness a bit. If I'm shooting with a moderately sharp lens though, I'll just leave it at 0. Okay, so part 2 of tip number 3. The dehaze slider. Ironically, you're gonna use the dehaze slider to actually add a bit of haze. Bringing it down to -10 to -20 adds that subtle bit of etherealness to the photo. Keep in mind, you would have to make slight adjustments to your exposure and contrast while playing around with the dehaze. You might want to add a little bit of contrast back in and drop the exposure slightly. And remember, making small adjustments at a time is key to making tasteful edits. If you want to take it a step further, you can try masking out your subject and just adding the haze to your scene. Okay, so on to part 3 of tip number 3, the curves. Start by making a basic S-curve, nothing too crazy, and then you're going to add a little fade to the highlights and the blacks just a bit. This part is a little more trial and error than the other 2 editing tips, but I'll stress again that making small adjustments at a time is the key. This gives the photo a bit of a vintage film-like touch, which really adds to the dreamy vibe. Okay, so bonus editing tip. Try adding a little grain in your edit. Grain tends to soften up the photo a little more, and in a way, it sort of brings everything together. I know adding grain is a really subjective thing. Some people love it, some people hate it, so if you really don't want to add it, it's not essential to the dreamy look. And that, my friends, is how I get the dreamy look in my photos. I really hope this video helps you guys and at least gave you a little insight into how to achieve this look. If you have any questions or would like to add a tip or 2 of your own, drop it in the comment section below. And if this video absolutely blew your mind and you're like, wow, this advice made me 1,000 times better at photography, then maybe consider subscribing. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next video. Ew, that's way too much.